How do you build trust in a team setting? I'm Chad, and I get to help some of the most brilliant organizations and universities on the planet build cultures of connection, belonging, and trust. And so in this video, I'm going to share 3 distinctions of how you can build trust in your own team setting, whether it's virtual and remote or in person. And then I'm going to share one way that you can build trust without speaking a word. Let's get into it. All right, so before we start building trust in a team setting, we have to understand, what are we actually building? What is it? And in order to do that, I want to offer a definition for the words connection, and the distinction between belonging, and the distinction between trust. I would argue, and my co-partner in crime, so part of this is coming from me and Will Wise's work in how to ask powerful questions and create conversations that matter. You know, we wrote this book because we felt like the world needed it, and there was a national trust deficit, which is, by the way, backed up by a whole heap of stats. There's a whole bunch of polls that say roughly 50% of people in the workforce do not trust the people that work above them and around them. Half. So 1 in 2 people, you either don't trust or they don't trust you. And so it has massive implications for team performance, because if you don't trust someone, it's very hard to delegate and rely on the fact that work will get done well and efficiently, etc. And so we want to increase this trust. And so to do this, I think we need to distinguish between connection, belonging, and trust. Connection happens when people are seen, heard, and understood for exactly who they are and who they are not. Belonging happens when people are accepted for who they are and who they are not. And we would argue that trust is when people express who they are and who they are not with the assurance that they will be uplifted and included in that process. You know, Google found the number one characteristic of high-performing teams at Google is the degree of psychological safety in that team. And talking with Google employees, the way that they train people and walk people through that idea of psychological safety, part of it has to do with inclusivity. Can people express who they are and be invited? And so first of all, if you want to build trust in a team setting, take that definition and add the word invite to it. Right? So are you inviting people to express who they are and who they are not, and also assuring them that they'll be uplifted and included in the process? Because if people don't have that, there's no psychological safety, and team performance takes a dive. Now, I promised that I would unpack one way that you could build trust without saying a word. And I promised that I would share one technique or idea to build trust without saying a word. All you have to use is the 2 appendages that live on the side of your head. I would argue that neuroscience would suggest that there are 2 dominant ways that we listen and process information. Now, this is a huge oversimplification of neuroscience for the sake of learning and putting this into practice rather than diving deeply into the research. So I would argue that, and you could think about it as this ear listens in one way and this ear listens in the other way. The way that it actually is happening is the part of your brain that develops first, that amygdala, the lizard brain, the part that has the fight or flight response. But because we live in a land of no saber-toothed tigers, I think culturally in a work and team setting, it's more of a fight, flight, or a need to be right. And that's where the first way of listening comes in. And so our default way of listening is listening to win. Our deliberate way of listening, much harder, but also really great at building trust and rapport, is listening to understand. And this is where, just for a minute, you set aside your lifetime of ungoogleable experience and you just tune in to that person to really see, hear, understand them, and accept and uplift them for who they are. You know, one of my favorite quotes is this idea that listening is being able to be changed by the other person. And I love that because it doesn't mean that you have to change your opinions, right? It doesn't mean that you need to agree with other people's ideas. but it does mean that you have to accept the fact that no self survives a conversation, right? When you enter in a conversation, you will learn things about yourself and that other person that you didn't know before, and that old version of you will die, and you'll be upgraded to a slightly more nuanced, wise version of yourself. Now, organizationally, oftentimes in meetings and even by the water cooler or when we jump on Zoom and we're waiting for the first 5 minutes for everybody to get into the Zoom room, we hear somebody say something and then we often jump in with our own experience. So listening to win is this idea that sometimes it literally happens and that we want to one up. So, oh, you got 2 hours of sleep? I only got 1 hour of sleep last night, right? So sometimes it shows up literally. More often than not, it shows up as the opposite of listening, which I would argue is waiting for your chance to talk. And that is not very trust and rapport building. It does not invite people to express who they are with the assurance that they'll be uplifted and included in the process. Whereas when you're just in this mindset of listening to understand, really easy for that person not only to feel seen, heard, and understood, but to also feel accepted. And so you check that connection, you check that belonging box, and because you're there and you're really present and you're just wanting to get their experience, I would argue that you're also building trust in that moment without saying a word. Now, if you want one trick to hack your brain or trick your mind into listening to win, it's to listen to what somebody else has shared and then make sure the next sentence that comes out of your mouth ends in a question mark, not a period. Ask a question. It's amazing how frequently as adults we listen to what somebody else said and then we respond to it with a statement. And a statement can make someone feel heard, especially if you're reflecting what you hear, but typically it's like your opinion or your own experience. It's listening to win. Whereas when you respond with a question rooted in your own curiosity, it lets that person know that not only you heard them, but you're interested and you want to know more about them. It's really inviting in that way. All right, that is how you build trust in a team setting in a very short snapshot bubble, right? This is all of my work focused around doing this. In fact, part of the reason my company's name is We and Me is one of the most trust building shifts an organization can make is from individually, from this perspective of it's all about me to a focus on the others. And there's something really powerful when that shift happens. And so if you're ever stuck and you're wondering why there's a lack of trust, just ask yourself, is the group, are you, is the team in this mindset or this one? This doesn't do a great job of building trust. This does. Have an awesome day. Whew, I suppose that's a